Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this panel. The title that has been given is Rethink Security, A Tale of Two Shores, a New Security Architecture in the Gulf. I introduce myself. My name is Maria Gianniti. I am a foreign correspondent at TG1 Rai, that is the Italian broadcasting service, public broadcasting service. And I will co-moderate this panel with Julian Barnes-Dacey, that is the director of the Middle East and North Africa program at the European Council of Foreign Relations. Why we discuss about the Gulf, about the security of this region? Because there have been a lot of things going on there. There is a rise of insecurity in the region, due to several factors. The first of all, starting with the US withdrawal from the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on the nuclear program, and then this led to threats of freedom of navigation in this area, and also the rising tension in Iraq, for example, after the US-led assassination of the Iranian general Suleimani, and just a few days ago, as everybody knows, also the killing of Fakhrizadeh, that is the man behind the Iranian nuclear program. So there is a lot to discuss with our guest panelist, and our first panelist is the Foreign Affairs Minister of Oman, Busaidi. Ahlan wa sahlan. How much are you worried for what is going on right now? I think we have a problem with the audio.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you, please.
Hi, greetings from Oman. Thank you for the opportunity to meet my colleagues and you through this medium. And I hope we will soon be able to travel and visit Rome, beautiful Rome, which we miss very much. In response to your question, really, I tend to hold a view that is one of optimism. We should always have that hope that as we evolve and as we develop, we can see hope for a very effective and sustainable security structure for this region. But this security structure, to be able to make it sustainable, will undoubtedly have to be inclusive, and it will have to be based on a multilateral set of work between all the regional states, because that will ensure the necessary confidence that should be built as pillars of security for all of us. We have been blessed for so many years in the GCC to have actually enjoyed a very healthy working relationship. But the world is changing, and there are transitional developments taking place almost everywhere. And now with the pandemic, which added a new set of certain challenges that needs to be dealt with, but all these challenges cannot be dealt single-handedly. It has to be dealt on the concept of cooperation and inclusivity.
Thank you, Minister. So I will leave the floor to my co-moderator, to Julian, please, for the next question.
Thank you very much, and very good to be with you all this afternoon. I wondered if we could turn to Yemen. Mr. Al-Hadrami, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Yemen is often seen as one of the key regional hotspots for a lot of the regional tensions. Obviously, we talk a lot about the nuclear deal, but then we talk about the regional situation. There is some hope in some quarters that Yemen might be the space for some cooperation between regional states. What possibilities do you see in terms of that happening? Are regional and domestic players within Yemen really moving towards an agreement, towards a desire for peace? Or do you see a continued stalemate which is going to afflict the country even as the humanitarian and economic situation continues to deteriorate?
Well, thank you very much for having us, of course, here. And let me take this opportunity to thank Italian Foreign Ministry and ISPI for organizing this. We wish to be in Rome today, but I think we, as we all grappling with this pandemic, we're happy to see everyone. You know, it's a vital question, and I think Yemen situation and the current situation in Yemen is vital to the security of the region. And as you said, it's a local motivated, rooted conflict that didn't start because of the rivalry in the region, but it was in fact exacerbated because of the rivalry in the region. How Yemen would play within this theater of the region is also important. And I think one of the main questions that I wanted to highlight, and perhaps answering that question would lead to what would the situation be in Yemen like in the future, and how it would actually relate to the security of the region. And in answering that question, I think it would shed some light to the question you said. I mean, one of the issues that we have in Yemen, that the war has taken so long now. We're in the 6th year of the war, and I think if the war did not see an end soon, it would not be good news, not just for Yemen alone, but also for the region. And that is, of course, in turn, because of the geostrategic location that Yemen holds near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, near the very extremely important region, which holds a very significant status in the market. So having the question, and when would the conflict in Yemen, which has been exacerbated because of the rivalry in the region, end, would actually shed light in some of the and answer the questions that you answered. And I think if we are to answer or try to attempt to answer that question, we need to focus on answering a more specific question, which is how to end this conflict. And I believe 3 issues need to be highlighted in that sense. And dealing with any of these issues separately from other issues would eventually not reach to the conclusion. I mean, one of the issues that we need to solve in Yemen is basically the need that not to view the Yemeni conflict as a humanitarian crisis alone. I mean, solely meaning or viewing by some of the international donors that Yemen is merely a humanitarian crisis really sent the wrong signals for the rebels and for the Houthis that they will be recognized in the future, and that the political solution is not near. I think the second point is Iran has to stop supporting the Houthis and has to stop interfering in our region and has to respect international law. Iran needs to know that if it needs to stay as a good neighbor, it needs to spend its own money raising its own issues with home, but not sending it to some militias and killing Yemenis and others in the region. And I think the third point that needs to be highlighted is that we do have some internal disputes and internal frictions within the coalition. I mean, if you see at what is happening now, we have one of the strongest coalition, unanimous support by the international community, the best weapons that money could buy, a repressive regime in the north, with the Houthis, with no democracy, wanting to resurrect this Hashemite legacies, which is adopting the theocracy model of Iran. And yet 6 years and we're not finishing it. And we need to highlight that the Riyadh agreement needs to be implemented, which is one of the main things that would stick and make this coalition stick together. But 13 months now, and we don't see any end to that. And I think, and with all honesty, without the cooperation and the collaboration or the thinking of the United Arab Emirates strategy and agenda in Yemen, by not fully supporting those elements in the STC to do what they do in Yemen, we would not see an end of this. I mean, I just wanted to just say this, lay it out, because without really understanding fully what is to come and what's at stake in Yemen, I don't think we could relate to any other issues. I elaborated some more, but I could elaborate more if you want. Thank you.
Let me just ask one follow-up then. I mean, in that context, how willing and ready is the government that you represent to negotiate with the Houthis and to try and take this process forward? And linked to that, how is a Biden administration going to change calculations on the ground and in the region? We know that the US wants to end this war. Do you think that could help delay deliver a necessary push on all the players?
Yes, of course. we wanted this war to end yesterday, not today. We tried to actually start the process after the United Nations Security Council Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, back in March called for this attempt to cease fire and focus on COVID. We followed up with it. We welcomed it. We welcomed the crisis meeting that Martin Griffiths called for in March. So we are trying to do whatever we can to end this. And remember, the conflict in Yemen happened because the Houthis' actions, everything in there, including us and the coalition, is a reaction to that action. When you say, when you brought in the perspective of the Biden administration, the future US administration, we do maintain and have long maintained a strategic partnership with the United States in terms of many fields, including counterterrorism and violent extremism. And that will continue no matter what the change is in the new administration. You know, Yemen is in this region is so important for countering terrorism, is so important for the strategic interests of not just the United States, but the West. So what I would probably say, and I hope the Biden administration in the future will take into consideration, is how to deal with the Iranian deal, the JCPOA. We believe, as others in the region, in an inherent flaw in that deal, which was it tries back, starting from 2013, 2015 and on, to solve the Iranian issue without dealing with the greater issues in the Middle East, which the tentacles of Iran been wreaking havoc ever since. And that would not work. We know that we need a free Middle East from nuclear weapon. That's been the case. But without really dealing with what would Iran do, how it would benefit from this deal back in 2015 going on, and how it use this fund to actually raise more militias in Yemen, Hezbollah, and elsewhere. If we try to separate and solve these issues not together, I don't think we would win. That's what happened back then. We support the current administration stance in the maximum pressure campaign that has been going. It's one of the things that would actually help Yemen go to peace. Not the only one, but it is one of those major things that if we could curb Iran from involving in Yemen, it would actually help the process.
Okay, I will go to our next guest panelist, that is Al Ashraf, the Secretary General of GCC. This is an organization quite crucial right now, considering what is going on in the region, in the Gulf. How much is difficult to keep GCC together? Please.
Well, thank you, Maria, and I would like to take the opportunity to welcome everyone. I'm very glad to speak and to participate in this forum from Kuwait. And the GCC will be entering its 5th decade next year. It has been 40 years since the GCC was established back in 1981 by six member founding states. However, it has been a very challenging 40 years. Everyone who's been following the situation, not only in the Gulf, but in the wider Middle East, it's easy to see where the curve goes ups and downs. And it has been in the heart of the world security. And the GCC had played a significant role to stabilize the region. In fact, it has been the stabilizer for the region, despite all the challenges and despite all the interest that we've seen growing in the region. At the GCC, we strongly believe in peace and prosperity for everyone. We strongly believe on respecting the international law, as well as the UN Charter. We call for everyone to stop intervening in domestic affairs of other states, respecting the sovereignty and respecting their nationalism. And these are the principles in which the GCC has been calling for the last 40 years, and it is actually part of the GCC vision to live in harmony and in peace. At the same time, the GCC have shown a great demonstrations of a wide range development plan. Over the last 40 years, GCC countries has shown a significant development plans that focus on human capital, as well as enhancing huge investments on the infrastructure, as well as the development aspects. Last month, we've seen Saudi Arabia as the president of the G20. Its positions well-deserved, simply because it is reflecting what we believe on, what we stand for. Looking forward, and in light of the pandemic, I think the challenge is even greater. The challenge is sparing no one. And I think it is a time to demonstrate a joint action where the COVID-19 have shown that no one can work through this pandemic alone. But if we work together, we will be better off for the future. We have been an advocate for peace. We call for everyone to respect the international law. And we believe that the people of this part of the world deserve a better future by making sure that the common agenda is focusing on development and prosperity for all. This is where the GCC stands, and this is where we call for all the partners within the Middle East, within the region and the world to join together to address the future challenges and to see where we can go from here.
I will ask you a question around, because of course you said it, you name it, your intention is to try to have more and more cooperation on several issues. But considering what happened during recent months, not only politically, but also due to the COVID pandemic, how much you could put all the countries, of all the GCC countries together in order to have real results of a cooperation point of view?
Well, this is very obvious. I mean, since February, since I became the Secretary General, and it's this time where the COVID-19 has become a pandemic and the lockdown, there has been an endless effort jointly by all the 6 state members to address the issues coming from COVID-19, starting from being a health pandemic, moving forward to see the consequences on different aspects of life, economic, as well as human, as well as educations, labor, and so on. So the cooperations between the 6 states is as strong as it could be. And we have maintained all our meetings virtually. Well, in fact, over the last 9 months or so, we managed to hold about 800 meetings virtually in all different levels, whether it's ministerial levels or whether it's the technical teams or support teams. This just show you how much we are working together, and we are determined to meet our common agenda, because COVID-19, as I said, have shown us that we have to work together and no one can handle these issues in isolations. But together we'll be better off, as I said, and we will be better equipped, not only for this crisis where all nations across the world are facing, but I think it is a tough lesson that we all learned, and we should be better prepared for the future as well.
Thank you very much. I leave the floor to Julian.
Let me turn now to Minister Ahmed Nasser Al-Mohammed Al-Sabah from Kuwait once again. Minister, you sit in a smaller country in the region, in a region that is beset by multiple challenges. Again, I wonder if you could give us your sense on how worried you are about what comes next. Is there a sense of optimism that some of the problems can be resolved? I'd be interested to get your sense on what a Biden administration could mean for new diplomatic engagement in the region and the prospect of bringing together different parties. And as part of that, I'd be very interested on the particular Kuwaiti perspective, given that you have played a role mediating in terms of both the intra-Gulf divisions, but also in the Arab Gulf and Iranian divisions. Is that a role that you see for yourselves going forward, particularly with your new leadership?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I truly do share with my other fellow dignitaries our willingness to be present in beautiful Rome, hopefully in the near future. I would like first to extend, since you are in Italy, I would like first to extend our deepest condolences to all those who fell under COVID-19 and to wish a speedy recovery to all those who are under treatment. And in regards to your question, and especially if I see the title, the aspect of security between the two riverine countries are multifaceted. And I cannot concur enough with all of the officials, the ministers, but also the SG of GCC in trying to find a common denominator for all of our challenges. If I may, and before we tackle the new US administration, in Kuwait, we see that the challenges that we face during all of at least the 40 years of GCC are tripartite, three-layered. First, we have internally, we have lots of challenges and security challenges that we should address them head on, and we cannot address them head on if we are not in sync with each other. All of us are facing multiple challenges in our economy, in our economy reforms. Most of us, or all of us, in our education and trying to rise the education to 21st century. All of us are facing in job seeking and fulfilling our employment void. So there are numerous challenges that together we can face them with an approach which is more reliable, to put it this way. And then if we go on externally, with Iran, we always had this problem with Iran. The problem with Iran being a huge neighbor. Kuwait always seeked dialogue with Iran, and you have mentioned that the late His Highness the Emir was charged by all of GCC leaders to conduct a dialogue with Iran. We always call for respect of international law, non-interference in internal affairs of countries, and reinforcing the pillars of statehood in each and every country in the region. It is one of the things that we always say, and to have them all in an open dialogue where all of our concerns are on the table. This is our approach. For example, for Iran, Yemen, the same thing with Yemen. My homologue and my brother, Minister Mohammed al-Hadrami, mentioned thoroughly the crisis in Yemen. And back in 2016, we have held talks in Kuwait 109 days. But the main issue is the respect of international law. There is international resolutions that is not respected and is not implemented by the international community, that we truly do see that for a global vision of security in the region, we need to maintain international law and to fulfill and to comply with all of the international legislations in this regard. Likewise, if I talk about the south of the Arabic Peninsula, same thing with the north of Arabic Peninsula, with Iraq in this matter. And I don't know if we're going to have the occasion with our brethren, the foreign minister of Iraq, for us and Iraq, and stable Iraq, a more independent Iraq in the decision-making process is something that that all of us in Kuwait, in GCC, and beyond in Arab League wish for Iraq in this matter to be free of all of external influences in Iraq. We support Iraq in all of its endeavors to be more incorporated within the international community, within its natural habitat in the Arabic Peninsula and in GCC. And we encourage also a further engagement of Iraq with the all Western external world. Regarding the future administration, we have worked with either side of the aisles all over the decades. For us, maintaining the security of this region is primordial for having a fluidity in maintaining the security of energy in the world. This region was always a safe haven for the past 4 decades, where all of the region were in turmoil. We were the one who were navigating in a very treacherous water, but we were navigating it prudently, not only for Kuwait, but also and trying safe harbors for our vessels. We think that there is the emphasis on the importance of the region will not shift from one side of the aisle, as I mentioned, to another side of the aisle. As we are dealing, at least here in Kuwait, we deal with institutions, and we think that in the end, institutions would prevail.
If I could ask a quick follow-up to that. President-elect Biden today in an article with the New York Times seemed to reaffirm his position that he would work towards a recompliance of the nuclear deal with Iran before moving on to regional issues, although he said he wanted to do that swiftly after the nuclear deal. Is that a timeline that you and your regional counterparts can live with and can work with?
We had mentioned back in 2015, we have welcomed JCPOA. Any tension between Iran and the international community doesn't put us in a comfortable zone. But in the same time, discussing security measures in the Gulf, while their partners, the GCC brethren, all of us are absent, we don't think that it is the prudent move to do. And so that's why we urge the future administration for us to be on the table, and especially if, when the discussions is about the security measures in the Gulf and in the region.
Okay, I go to our next guest panelist, that is the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Iraq. Thank you for joining us, first of all. Well, your colleague from Kuwait just helped me to pose you the question, because he's asking, try to keep Iraq not influenced by other foreign intervention. But first of all, I would like to remind that Iraq, because the pandemic is a big issue also when we talk about security in the Gulf, that unfortunately Iraq, after Iran, is the second hit country by the pandemic. So my question is also how you're dealing with this. But then I would like you to follow up with what we heard by your colleague from Kuwait. The suggestion, please not have external interference in your internal politics. Please, I give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me in this forum and allowing me to participate with my colleagues and many other friends to discuss matters related to our countries, but also to the area. I think if you allow me to just to mention the challenges that we are facing, or one of them, and perhaps the most important One has to do with COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, Iraq has been hit by COVID-19, and it is a huge, big challenge. It affected our life. It affected also our economy, and in fact, combination of having COVID-19 and low price of oil had affected greatly our daily life. So we are facing this challenge as many other societies are facing this. But here, because of lack of infrastructure, especially health infrastructure, and because of security situation, still we are facing some threats of ISIS terrorist organizations, but also because of economic crisis or financial crisis. So it is more difficult for us to face this big challenge. However, we took measures, and we are trying to educate our people and to educate ourselves how to prevent ourselves from this disease. According to our Ministry of Health, the COVID-19 has affected about 500,000 people, and around 10,000 people has passed away because of COVID-19, unfortunately. So still, it is a huge challenge for us. Having said that, we may mention also other challenges that we are facing. As I said, the low oil price, and Iraq is depending heavily on oil income. In fact, about 88% of the income or for the budget annually is depending on oil income. So imagine when oil price is going down, which kind of financial crisis that we will have in this country. Combination of COVID and oil price, and later on, of course, the decision which has been taken by OPEC countries plus to decrease the export of oil. All these created a huge problem for us. And the other challenge, which has been mentioned directly or indirectly, but for us it is a big challenge, has to do with the tension between Washington and Tehran. For many other countries, perhaps, this will be part of foreign policy or has to do with two countries which are far away from them. But for us, it is an internal politics, in fact. The Iranian influence in our society and in our politics is clear, but also the American. The American were here since 2003, and they had their army here with 160,000 soldiers in here. They withdrew in 2011, but because of the attack of ISIS terrorists, we invited the American and many other allies to come back and to fight with us the terrorist organizations of ISIS, and we are thankful for their participation in the fight against ISIS. So the American has got their influence in our society as the Iranian, and when they have got tension or when they have tension, then we see the results in our politics. We see the results internally. So this affected our society. So we have seen it that after withdrawal of the American side from JCPOA agreement, directly here we got conflict between two countries, and affected us also on security-wise. We hope that the new administration will approach this matter in a different way, and we are in good discussion and good relation with the Iranian side. So our destiny has to do with the area that I think I do agree with some of my colleagues that the security in the Gulf, it needs more than two to play. We must be all part of the security, and therefore the discussion about the security in the Gulf area or Gulf countries must be a discussion among all of us. At the end, we need a collective security. Otherwise, there will be always problems. I mean, two other countries cannot decide about all these countries. These are the main challenges that we are facing, and we are trying to manage with these challenges, to be honest. Some of them we can solve it. Some of them we can manage with it. Some of them we are thinking that in the future we can solve it. But as for the Iranian-American tension, we hope that there will be a new atmosphere, political atmosphere in near future. With the new administrations, if we are talking about the president-elect or the people surrounding him, we know them quite well. Almost all of them, they were very much engaged in the Iraqi affairs. They were all in the same administration as when President Obama was there. And they were responsible, in fact, for the Iraqi files. So we know them quite good. And we hope that we can have different kinds of discussions with them, and at least to manage the crisis and not to increase the tension in this area. Thank you very much. That was my points.
Yes, Thank you, Minister. If I may, before we follow our discussion, just a short follow-up. We do not have to forget that before the COVID crisis, as we remember, you're one of the most hit country, there was an internal uprising. It was months that especially youths were just rallying in Iraq in order to ask a better condition of living. So what about that? Of course, COVID covered everything, but we still have to remember what was going on in Iraq at that time before the pandemic stopped everything. What about the internal discussion and whether the requests that they used this way?
I didn't hear. You said before COVID crisis. I think are you talking about the demonstrations?
Absolutely. I was talking about the demonstration, especially the young people demonstrating in the street in Iraq.
Yes, the demonstrations in 2019 started in the beginning of October, and arrests also started in the southern government of the country. And there were huge demonstrations also in Baghdad. Of course, it means from one side that people are not satisfied with the situation, in fact. If you are talking about economy, and many young people are unemployed, and they don't see perspective. So that's the main situation, the main cause, I think, because sometimes when you are suffering and you see a better future, then hope is there. Many of them, they started not to see even hope for the future. That's one of the reasons. The second reason, to be honest, and once again, I'm saying the demonstrations has to do with internal matters, internal politics, internal economic situation, but also the tension between Washington and Tehran affected the society here. Affected the society because there were two camps and they were against each other, and they were selling both sides. They were selling their products inside Iraq, and there were some people buying these products from both sides. So mentioning that, I'm coming back to my argument that it was originally internally, but external effects were there. Now we don't have such a big demonstrations, although in Nasiriyah still, that's the governor south of the country, still we have people, political parties against each other. And there are some kind of demonstrations. This new government, the government of Kadhimi, when we started, and by the way, I was part of the previous government also. I was Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance. So I was aware of the situation at that time and what happened exactly in various areas of the country. This government, first we formed a committee to investigate who tried or who was part of this plan of the attacks on demonstration, and the investigation is still continuing. And this government also started to have negotiation with many leaders of the protests, and in fact, many leaders of the prime minister or in the government. So they became part of the political process. And we are trying, of course, to convince those people that there are some problems which we can solve, and there are other problems which is difficult to be solved now, especially the economic or financial crisis that we are facing. On long term, of course, we must try to change the whole structure of our economy. And we presented now the white paper, which is a guide to reform our economy. So we are trying to reform our economy, and we open dialogue with all political parties. And we plan for the early election. We hope that we will have our election June next year. And we think these were part of the demands of the people who were on street, and they had their protest movement.
Thank you very much. Julian.
Thank you. Let me turn now to Rafael Grossi, who is the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, obviously working over a very sensitive issue, the question of Iran's nuclear program that has consumed so much regional and international attention over recent years and looks like it's going to come back to the forefront of the agenda in the coming months. Perhaps in the next round of questions, we can talk about the wider region, but for this round, I have two questions, one about what's happening now and one about what may come in the future. Firstly, could you give us a sense of your perception of the level of Iranian compliance with current agreements? Is the level of Iranian access that they are giving you indicative of a constructive approach that you think can be built on going forward?
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and especially the foreign ministers of Oman, Yemen, Kuwait, of course, Iraq, all countries that are very close to the IAEA. They are members of the IAEA, and we have an excellent degree of cooperation with all of them. So I'm honored to be there. So many layers to your question. When it comes to Iran, the issue of the Iranian nuclear program, of course, has been occupying the agenda of the IAEA for many years, more than 20, I would say, with ups and downs. It's been a long story with good moments and complicated moments. I would say, when you say about levels of compliance, I think we have to differentiate a number of things. First of all, when it comes to Iran, there is not only the JCPOA that we inspect and verify in the Islamic Republic of Iran. The JCPOA is, if you want, if I can describe it this way, it's like a special mandate we got from the UN Security Council, Resolution 2231 in 2016, when the JCPOA was implemented. And of course, the IAEA, which is not a party to the JCPOA, but the inspector of the JCPOA, became involved. Apart from that, in parallel, we have a comprehensive safeguards agreement which covers the normal operation of the rest of the Iranian program, and an additional protocol. An additional protocol is, not to become too technical, is an agreement that gives the agency, not only in Iran, but in many other countries, a heightened degree of, a deeper degree of access. So there's much more to it when it comes to Iran than the JCPOA. So when you say compliance, we have to make a differentiation there. Why I say this? Because on the JCPOA, we have a rather paradoxical situation. The JCPOA, as you all know, is still in place. Is still in place in spite of the withdrawal, unilateral withdrawal of one of the initial original parties, namely the United States. The agreement is still in place with a particularity, and this particularity being that after this withdrawal and after some time, Iran announced a sequence of measures to decrease its level of compliance with the JCPOA. So if you were to ask me nominally whether there is compliance with the JCPOA, no, there is a level of compliance which is going down. But this is not done in a clandestine way. This is why I talk about a paradox. This is announced, and this is verified by us, by the IAEA, and we report about it. And Iran makes no secret about this, and it says that these, of course, diminishing degrees of non-compliance or compliance or non-compliance with the JCPOA is a result of, it's a retaliatory measure to the withdrawal from the United States of America. Does that mean there is no access? Yes, there is access. There is cooperation on the part of Iran. I have my inspectors there right now, as we speak, verifying, as I say, the very specific, the JCPOA is a very detailed, very meticulous sort of an agreement that has many, many elements in it. So we are doing there. In terms of access, this year was, we had a bit of a bumpy ride because for many, many months, Iran was not allowing our inspectors to access to important places which we had requested as part of their normal additional protocol and comprehensive safeguards agreement. Finally, well, you may know that I traveled to Tehran, and we were able to overcome that temporary setback, if I may put it like that. And so we continue to work. But of course, there are challenges.
And if I could just follow up on that quickly, what sense of confidence do you have that Iran could come back into full compliance? And what would be the most critical steps that you would want to see undertaken to see that happen?
You mean with the JCPOA?
Exactly. If there was an agreement by the Iran and the US to come back into mutual full compliance, do you think that would be a process that could be easily managed? And what would be the critical steps that you would want to see out of Tehran?
Absolutely, it could be done. It was done, and let me remind you and remind the participants that back in 2015, the agreement was in July 2015, and by what is called the implementation day, which came in sometime in January 2016, Iran quite quickly, quite fast, I would say, complied with a number of quite important and far-reaching obligations, like shipping out low-enriched uranium, by starting work on the design of the Arak reactor, by, for example, reducing the number of centrifuges that they would be allowed to spin as part of their uranium enrichment program. So if there was an agreement and there was political will on all sides, we would be able to be there to ascertain as the inspector that this is happening. Of course, the political decision is not ours to take, but for the feasibility of the action, yes, it would be feasible.
Thank you very much. Let me go back to Minister Al-Busaidi now from Oman, if I may. And I wondered if I could pose you a couple of questions. I mean, we've heard a lot about various challenges and threats to the security order. Could you perhaps give us your sense of what a constructive pathway forward could be right now? I mean, obviously, we hear a lot about whether one talks about the nuclear deal before the regional issues or vice versa, the degree of regional buy-in or not. And you also obviously have, and this is something that we haven't touched so much, huge economic, medical challenges across the region. If we're talking about a viable security architecture going forward, what would be the Omani vision for that? So that would be my first question. My second question would be, where can non-regional outsiders help you? So if one is thinking about European actors in particular, what would you see as a role that those states, whether individually or as the EU together, could do to support you on those combined tracks? Please, Minister.
Thank you. I think, if I may, or at least express the hope that we can all agree that there needs to be a dialogue, a meaningful dialogue between all the regional players, and to maybe try and reset the button for new regional relationships. All of us want the best for the region. And even those who might disagree with us on certain issues want the best for the region. But if we start the blame game, then I'm afraid confidence tends to break. It gets broken and relations deteriorate. We need to move beyond that phase, and we must be disciplined about this and not really indulge into the temptation to criticize each other all the time. Meaningful, transparent dialogue among us all is a prerequisite among us here, people of the region, governments of the region, before we seek any help by our friends. As they say in English, charity begins at home. So we must be faithful in the respect and support we offer to all of our partners. And that is the pathway, I think, to a better environment in terms of security and stability. And here, you can help us. You can speak out freely with every single one of us, because you are genuine partners of the region and friends and allies in Europe and in the United States. And I think it will do no harm to that relationship. In fact, it will be strengthened if you speak straight to us and not just tell us what we like to hear. I think that, there's a big difference. With that comes what my brother from Kuwait has mentioned, is central in how you can help us, and that is in the economic sphere. Partnerships, diversification. Every country in the Gulf now is embarking on diversification. Every country in the Gulf has put plans and visions how to achieve that. So in addition to work among us and cooperate in realizing some of these plans, I think our friends in Europe can also join in and partner with us in the path forward that will bring deeper interest, deeper bonds between us here in the region and between us and you in Europe and elsewhere. Thank you.
And do you think there's any particular possibility of progress in Yemen? I know that that's an area that you're very focused, obviously. What's your sense on possibilities there to take things forward positively?
Well, as my friend and brother from Yemen has mentioned. I think an international base rule system has to be respected. Law has to be respected. Agreements have to be respected. He mentioned the Riyadh Agreement, which we fully support, but also there is the Stockholm Agreement. And now Martin Griffiths is hoping to achieve a joint declaration, a political declaration, a statement between the parties that I hope they will all sign up to and take them to the negotiating table, because I think everyone agrees, inside and outside Yemen, there is no military solution to this problem. We've got to work harder and pull together to bring them to the table and negotiate their future. It is a Yemeni problem after all. And it needs a Yemeni solution. We can help in that process daily. The humanitarian situation is there and it's very difficult. And I think that has to be also addressed in the most effective way. And I wish we have much more resources to be able to help. We're doing what we can, but I also want to remind the international community that there is an obligation in that sphere to bring a plan of action for the reconstruction of Yemen post a political agreement, when we have a political agreement on the party and a roadmap for the future of Yemen.
Okay, thank you, Minister Al-Busaidi, because it gives me the next question also to your colleague, Yemeni colleague. Minister Al-Busaidi said we can help to have together all the different Yemeni factions and to help them to come to an end, to put this war to an end. But we know that the Yemeni conflicts, and you remember this also in your first intervention, how much this conflict is emblematic of internal but also international rivalries. You said before, please do not consider the Yemeni conflict just a humanitarian crisis. This is very important. So if we have to consider how much the international community can help you in order to get out of this long war, what do you expect by the next US administration? And coming to the internal situation, how much you as government coexist with the southern transitional government that we know control the Aden areas? Please.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I share many of my distinguished colleagues from Oman said. We need to solve this. It's a Yemeni problem that needs a Yemeni solution. And I agree with him fully. There is no all-military solution to this problem. But the problem is, and we've seen it before Sweden, we've seen it before Kuwait, and I'm happy to see my also friend from Kuwait here. Yes, there is no all-military solution to the problem. But I'm afraid with the Houthis, if there's no military pressure, we will not get to that point where we can actually focus on the political aspects. It was because we were a few kilometers from the port in Hodeidah that the Houthis finally agreed to go back in 2018 in December to Sweden. And I think, and you rightly mentioned my worry of the first point I mentioned in my first intervention, which is viewing Yemen as solely a humanitarian issue. I mentioned this not because the humanitarian situation is not dire. It is. I mean, I've seen the reports. I live in there, and I know that we need to do everything we can to alleviate the suffering of the people. But I'm worried about that. When the international community, especially the donors, would just view Yemen from this angle, the Houthis, unfortunately, would have this illusion of being recognized in the future. And that the same angle of just viewing Yemen as a humanitarian and the rapprochement between some of the actors with the Houthis would feed this illusion. And in a sense, it would hurt Martin Griffiths' UN-led process, because the Houthis, as they did in Kuwait back in 2016, when we have 100 plus days, they were so close to ending this deal. And then eventually, because of some rapprochement between international actors, they really thought that they could get more outside of Kuwait than they would get when signing with Wild al-Sheikh, the previous envoy in Kuwait. And that's the problem. So we deal with the humanitarian situation. We'll do everything we can. Access is not mainly a problem. Inflation is, supporting the central bank, and all these, we would work with them. Deal with how to not the Houthis divert oil and profiteer from the humanitarian, like the Europeans do in their meeting. But at the same time, we need to focus on how to move forward. You mentioned the Southern Transitional Council and the U.S. position or potential position. There's two different issues. I think the latter one with the Southern Transitional Council, I mentioned it in my third point in my previous intervention. These are three issues that needs to be together dealt if we are to get out of this quagmire. The humanitarian aspect, Iran has to see support and respect international law. And also we have to deal with the internal problems with the coalition. And one of them is the STC. The Southern Transitional Council believes that it's the sole representative of the South. That is not true. I wish it would have been true. It would have made the problem of the South easier. We have now a southern problem because of this. How to deal with it? The United Arab Emirates is the key. They have to recalibrate their agenda. They have to realign their objectives in Yemen so as to be in line with the main objectives of the coalition. There's no way around it. The STC would actually go and implement the Riyadh agreements with the help of the United Arab Emirates, and I hope that will deal to that. Linking it to the U.S. Potential influence in Yemen, I think it deals more with the Iranian issue. And again, sending bad signals to the Houthis would mean a lot. And being lenient on Iran and having Iran being access to a lot of billions and tens of billions, even though it's their money, but they're not free to use this money to wreak havoc in my country. And I think that has to be part of the deal because we're in it together. And then like my colleague says, we have to be sitting on the table, not exclusively, but our issues have to be sitting on the table if we see it. So if there is a new deal with Iran, let it be. We want Iran to be a big, good neighbor in the neighborhood, but they have to start acting like a good neighbor before we can accept them. And to deal with the Iranian deal without actually dealing with Yemen and Hezbollah and others, it would be just like putting gasoline on fire. And I don't think that will help the international community. That will not help us. And eventually, Yemen will become a bigger problem than it is right now, and it would cost the international community more to solve. I hope I answered your question, and then I could elaborate some more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Julian.
Thank you very much. Let me turn back to Mr. Al-Hajraf, Secretary General of the GCC. We've talked a lot about Iran, so why don't we change tack slightly? And I'd like to ask you two questions. One is the state of intra-Arab Gulf relations. Obviously, there is a sharp fault line and divide there. The blockade of Qatar has been in place for quite some time. What is your sense of breaking through that division? Obviously, Jared Kushner and others from the U.S., the current U.S. administration, will be in the region this week. Do you think, and there's talk of potential kind of Saudi, Qatari progress, are we any closer to a breakthrough there? Secondly, a number of GCC states have, of course, recently reached normalization agreements with Israel. And that's quite a remarkable shift for the region, and it does herald, in a sense, the formalization of a new order, which is as much about Iran as it is about Turkey. Could you give me your sense of what you think that means for the region and whether you expect to see further GCC states moving in that direction, please?
Thank you, Julian, for the two questions. And if you allow me, I probably would like to go back to the previous questions you asked to Mr. Al-Hadrami about the Yemen situation. Everyone knows that Yemen is the next door neighbor to the GCC and the southern part of Saudi Arabia. And the stability in Yemen is very crucial to the GCC. And the GCC initiative is actually one of the three main pillars for solution in Yemen. So what can you help as European Union? I think to put more pressure on the Houthis to accept the peace negotiation. I think you can put pressure on Iran to stop intervening in the Yemeni situation. I think you can help by supporting the UN envoy, Martin Griffith, to conclude his work. My biggest worry is the Yemen after the peace agreement, if we reach there, because rebuilding Yemen requires a lot of resources. And in light of COVID-19, I'm afraid that the resources won't be available, or it will be available, but not to the scale or to the amount is needed. So I think we need to think way ahead of how to plan properly for that time, because the Yemeni people deserve to live in peace, and rebuilding the Yemen requires the international community to step into this process, which will take so many years to see the result. Back to your questions about the rift within the GCC. As I said in my previous interventions, the GCC went over the last 40 years with ups and downs, and it is very acceptable to have the differences in some of or differences in the views of how to address some of the issues. We've seen the genuine effort, noble effort by the late Emir of Kuwait, Sheikh Sabah, which stepped in from day one to resolve this rift. His effort was widely supported by the GCC countries as well as the international community. And the effort, although he passed away last September, but I think his legacy will remain. And I think our friends and colleagues, Minister of Kuwait, Foreign Affairs of Kuwait, can probably elaborate on this. But from my positions, I can see the effort is ongoing, and with the support from all the member states and with the friends, we hope that we will reach a conclusion and to turn this chapter and start a new chapter as we are approaching the 5th decade of the GCC. Your second question regarding the normalizations that took place between some member states and Israel. I would say that this is a sovereign decision. They have the right to take this kind of actions. We fully respect that. But I would like also to remind everyone that the Arab Peace Initiative is still on the table since 2002. We strongly believed with the two-state solution to end the long-standing Arab-Israel conflict or Palestine-Israel conflict, because there will be no peace and prosperity in the regions if we don't solve these issues. I think the two-state solution is fair for everyone, and this is just an implementation of the UN resolutions, which is very important as we addressing the security within the region. And I think if we guarantee that the international law is respected, the UN resolution is implemented, and we create a mechanism where we keep engaging in a constructive dialogue to address all these issues, I think we will be in better positions. We strongly believe that the people in the region and the Middle East region know their region better than anyone else, yet there is a huge interest of the international community within the region, knowing that 20% of the world energy is imported from the region, knowing the strategic locations of the region. And I think this kind of partnership, which we would like to see, enhancing the dialogue, enhancing exchanging views, addressing the issues in a very open, transparent way. And I think this is what's needed post-COVID-19 pandemic, because we have seeing countries are grouping in economic reform. This will be our biggest challenge for the future. I think for the next 10 years or so, the economic consequences of the pandemic will be very huge. And I think with the reform effort going on within the GCC, and we believe this will require a lot of collaborations with friends in the EU and others across the globe, because there is a huge interest, mutual interest, that combining everyone.
Thank you, Secretary General. So I go quickly back to Minister Al-Sabah from Kuwait. The Secretary General reminded the normalization of relationship with Israel, but we know which is the position of Kuwait. This is something that Kuwait will not do, differently from what we have seen with Bahrain and United Arab Emirates. So is this the solution? And the second, as Oman, like Oman, you had experienced an historical change in leadership. Do the new leadership, which are the priorities of the new leadership? Please, Minister.
Well, thank you so much. And regarding normalization ties, each and every country has its own sovereign decision to take based on what it sees its national security and what can benefit from it. So this is a sovereign decision by any country. Regarding the peace process, and as I've mentioned Iraq, and as I've mentioned with other very sizzling and boiling points in the region, it's by maintaining international law. It's by implementing international law. International law, it is what saved us for now over 70 years after World War II from succumbing into chaos and into law of jungle. Kuwait was subjected to invasion, and back now almost 30 years through international law, we have been able to regain our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and our legitimacy in this matter. And you can go with everything else. With the peace process, we think it is also by maintaining international law. There are numerous international references in it where a two-state solution is very much visible, and peace as a strategical means for the Arab world, which was clearly indicated back in 2002 with the Arabic peace plan. We think it is the one for the way forward in this regard. So this is our position. If all of the concerns is addressed, then Kuwait will join as all countries that has agreed on with the Arabic Peace Initiative. Regarding, and thank you for your words, and also thank you for all of the expressions that I heard from some of my colleagues about the late His Highness Sheikh Sabah's mediation efforts. This year actually marked the passing away of two leaders who symbolizes wisdom in the region, Sultan Qaboos and the late His Highness Sheikh Sabah. Both of those leaders are founding fathers of GCC, where at that time, back in 1981, it was just in the dawn of the Iraqi-Iranian war. So the whole region was in a very tipping, boiling point. And therefore, Sultan Qaboos with Sheikh Sabah and with other leaders in GCC managed to create this idea, which translated after to an institution of principles and values and beliefs, which is GCC. Kuwait will continue its mediation effort. Kuwait will continue in prevailing dialogue over conflict and over violence. Kuwait will continue as an advocate for international law. Kuwait will continue also for advocating, strengthening the pillar of states in each and every country and not undermining in any shape or form the pillars of state in any countries in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping we can go to Minister Hussein in Baghdad. I see his camera is just lost us for a second. No, he's there, Mr. Hussein. Thank you very much. I wondered if we could just explore a bit more how outside players, and I guess particularly the EU and European states, can support some of the reform needs in Iraq. I think as Europeans look at Iraq today, they see a devastated economy. They see quite widespread corruption. There's clearly a need for significant security sector reform, and you have the presence of militias. As I think you discussed earlier, the need to reassert a kind of sovereign Iraq unfolds. How can European states help you address and move forward in the reform agenda to address some of those specific needs?
Once again, thank you very much, and thank you for this question. As many people know, that the infrastructure in Iraq has been destroyed, and for many reasons. One of the reasons has to do with the fact that Iraq was in war, engaged in war, internal war, external wars, for the last 50, perhaps 50 years. So that means almost everything related to infrastructure has been destroyed. And to rebuild the infrastructure and also to rebuild our economy, we need first investment and capital, foreign capitals, but we need also know-how, the know-how. To get these both, Europe can play an important role, and we are in good discussions with the European Union, and we have got an agreement, cooperation agreement with the European Union, and also with the European countries. We have got good relationship, and Europe can play also a role in helping us to guarantee our security. Still, we have got many security problems. So Europe has got the history here and knows this. Many of European countries, they know the society quite well. And of course, some of them, they have got good relationship with all neighboring countries. So that will help us. That's why we are focusing on Europe, and we try to get their help and their support to Iraq.
I think if I may,
answering your questions, Europe can play an important role.
And if I may just quickly follow up on that, I mean, I think one of the concerns that Europeans have is that the political leadership in Baghdad may not have either the internal strength or perhaps at times the will to press forward with these necessary reforms. And obviously, there is a concern that there are multiple power centers in Iraq and that it's very hard. And obviously, you as the government do face many internal challenges to take this forward. So how is the Iraqi government going to establish that kind of internal coherence and authority to drive forward this agenda to actually get the European support? Because I think if not, Europeans will remain wary.
You are right. Some of these reforms has to do, or some of the problems in our political system has to do with the bureaucracy. The other problem, which is a big problem, has to do with corruption in the political system. So fighting these two, it needs vision, and we have got the vision. It needs leadership. We have got the leadership, but it needs also internal support. this government and most of the my colleagues, I mean the ministers, they don't have political parties, or they don't have any political bloc in the parliament, including the prime minister, and this creates huge problem to implement the plans that we developed. But fighting corruption was also part of the previous government. I think we need a different system. The other problem that we are facing, the Iraqi constitution, is, I mean, if we talk about economic system, the constitution is demanding to have a kind of liberal, open society, but also market economy system. While the whole bureaucracy and the whole political administrations in this country is depending still on government and public sector. And of course, this has to do with the previous government, the Iraqi government, since 1968, they were following a kind of commando economy or socialist economy. So to transfer the whole system into a liberal, democratic, more open society and more open economy, it needs a lot of time. It needs strengthening the private sector. It needs more investment. It needs different kind of laws. It needs to fight bureaucracy, but also to fight corruption. So it is a long way, to be honest. But many other countries, they can help us, and among these countries, of course, the European countries can do a lot for us.
Thank you very much, Minister. We really have 5 minutes left before the end of this panel. And two quick questions for the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mr. Grossi. Considering the situation in the Gulf region, which is, in your opinion, what should be done in order to implement, to promote the much needed peace and security in the Gulf region? And second, which are your expectations from the future US administration, please?
Well, thank you very much. In terms of our own mandate, which is important, but of course focused on non-proliferation and also on technical cooperation in many areas in the peaceful applications of nuclear science, technology, and nuclear energy, which is very important. But I would say that if you put the question in terms, in political terms, I think it is crucially important to see a region fully committed to the non-proliferation norm. I think in the very illuminating presentations that we had today, several references were made to the past, to a past where on occasion the non-proliferation norms were avoided, or there were attempts to violate them with dire consequences for the entire region. So the role and the important cooperative relationship with the IAEA, the important commitment of all the countries in the region to the non-proliferation regime is, of course, essential. And more importantly, when we see a changing landscape in terms not only of nuclear non-proliferation, but nuclear energy itself. We are living in a world where in the Gulf, which would have been unimaginable a few years ago, you have the United Arab Emirates having started its first nuclear power plant with 3 more units to go. You have Saudi Arabia having indicated to us a strong interest in moving into the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. You have Egypt now moving very, very seriously into a nuclear power program. So the entire, I would say, equation in terms of the region and in terms of nuclear energy and all nuclear matters together in the compact of issues that are there is changing rapidly. And so we are ready, of course, at the IAEA. We are working with the Arab League. We are working, of course, with the GCC. We are working with all the institutions and the nations independently. On your last question, I would say the commitment and the cooperation from the United States is traditional. And of course, there would be nuances if a new administration came to power, but the cooperation and the support of the United States is something I take as something which is not under any question or doubt.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks to all our distinguished guests for participating to this panel. Thank you to Julian for co-moderating with me. I wish all the guests to host next year, inshallah, if the situation would allow us to be all together here in Rome instead of talking and through remote. Of course, it's not easy, but it was very, very interesting. So, and thanks to all of you who decided to participate to this panel. Thank you very much.
Shukran.